Gishab Dishnikaz, Ashkigaman Gamandao. I want to start by saying miigwech to Elder Mitchell for opening us up in such a good way. I really appreciate the opening prayer and his reminder to us to be respectful of each other. I think that's so important. The reminder of kindness and progress moving forward in these respectful relationships is so important. And it's a big theme of what I'm hoping to address today in a little bit more specifics. I feel guided by our elders and our ancestors in this journey and in building these relationships. So miigwech for that. I'd also like to start today by reflecting on the last 2 years. It's been incredibly difficult for everybody. We just heard from Heather about shifting an entire conference online. And that's a lot. That's a lot for everybody to deal with. And in every video call and video chat and virtual meeting, we've had to reveal our way of life to each other. From pets barking to children waving in the background. My son did a whole dance behind me the other day. Everyone's had a glimpse into our lives. And we've had to invite this positivity or negativity into our spaces and the invasiveness into our homes. And I think for that, we all have a new shared experience. One of the things that I've spoken about in the past is that if you magnify this experience and its most negative aspects, you can start to see what it might have been like for our ancestors to have to open up our land, to have to alter our way of life, to have to hide who we were, and to be pressured into signing treaties, whether we wanted to or not. And I see a big parallel there. And I think it's a good learning moment and a good teaching moment to share that. So I hope that we can all reflect on the current new experiences through this pandemic and look with a little more understanding on the historic experiences of our ancestors as a shared experience and share that in our interactions with non-Indigenous people, because it will be new for them, but it's a good way for them to understand this. I think that every relationship has some key components. Communication is fundamental. Dealing with issues as they arise head on is also fundamental. This is one of the most significant pieces to our successful relationship with Trent University, and I'll get there in a few minutes. But I've developed a qualitative model as a guide to assess our relationship building as a nation. This model I've spent the last 2 years working to implement across all of the various sectors and projects and proponents that we deal with. So all of the relationships that Curve Lake manages. And I'd like to share this spectrum with you. And then I'll share with you where we're at, sort of the history of our relationship with Trent University and where we're at now. So the beginning of any relationship spectrum is information sharing, where there's simply documents and notices are sent back and forth. It's just talking at each other without any interaction. And it's the starting off point. So that's not terrible as a starting off point. It's better if you can be receptive. And then as you move along the spectrum, we progress to engagement. So that's where we have a continuous back and forth communication and consideration for each party's perspective. There's a little bit more thought going into the information that you're receiving. After that, we move to the next stage is engaging in a constructive dialogue with ongoing involvement, where we can both share our needs and our wants and figure out how we can get to where we're going. And that's far more engaging, that's far more back and forth, but it's not really where anybody wants their relationship to be. So we move toward trust building, and this is critical. It's where there would be where the relationship is ongoing and there's reciprocal trust between both parties. You feel comfortable sharing things that you wouldn't share with everybody else, doing what we can mutually to support and help each other. Meaningful consultation is the next step on the spectrum, where we can share our ideas and gain feedback at very early stages and figure out how we build from a concept to a fully formed idea or project together, to ensure that it's reflective of the goals and the wants and the needs of all parties. When we finally reach a point where we have a sustainable and empowered relationship, where we're regularly in touch, discussing concepts as they arise, putting them into action together, we've reached our ultimate goal. This final stage of the spectrum is an easy, ongoing relationship with regular communication, shared visions, and the common attainment of goals. So working together for each party's goals and including all of the perspectives that you know about the other person in the relationship, the other organization or group in the relationship. We build these projects together from inception to completion, and there's benefits for everyone. I find the final stage of the spectrum is very respectful of our foundational belief as Anishinaabe of balance. In our belief system, we need balance in our world for things to continue to be plentiful and to sustain us. We all know we need water to sustain us and we need fire to keep us warm. And while many believe that there was no ownership system in First Nations prior to contact, I have to argue that this is completely not true. We have always understood that our future generations own the land and the resources, that we've borrowed these lands and resources from them, and that we have an obligation to return the lands and the resources to them when they get here. There are very few relationships that are respectful of this foundational belief of balance. The Curve Lake has a few relationships functioning at this final stage, but we have to remember that these relationships take time to build and to reach this level of trust. So I'd like to share with you the relationship that's hit this give and take, incorporating each other into all aspects, and that's our relationship with Trent University. I think to understand that, you have to rewind about 54 years ago. 54 years of friendship between Trent University and Curve Lake began when Curve Lake was the first group to welcome Trent to the area and made one of the first donations to the university fund, a $2 donation in 1964 by Curve Lake's chief Dalton Jacob was a kickoff to their fundraising campaign for the yet-to-be-born university. That symbolic gesture was the beginning of a unique partnership rooted in respect, honor, and friendship that has endured for more than 50 years now. Doesn't mean it's always been easy, and the path hasn't always been perfect. Trent University was the first university in North America to launch Canada's Native Studies program in 1969. Trent's current reputation as a major center for Indigenous studies can be traced back to that first program. Over the years, many students from Curve Lake have obtained their degrees at Trent University, have participated in cultural ceremonies and sporting events on the campus before going to university. I myself am a proud graduate of Trent. Having a university so close to our reserve has allowed many students to remain living in our community or close to home, and has allowed many more of our students to return to our territory. In a significant way, Trent University has enabled us to reclaim the narrative of our education. And as educators, I'm sure you all understand how important it is to reclaim that narrative, to have control over where you go for your education. And being able to do it and see ourselves reflected in that education is very important. Every relationship requires work. It evolves and it changes, it matures, and when neglected, it suffers. Our relationship over the years with Trent University was, for a period of time, allowed to shift from the governing body of the university to the academic Indigenous Studies department. This, as I'm sure you're aware and familiar with, is not an appropriate place for our relationship to rest. The university doesn't delegate its relationships with the federal government to the Canadian Studies Department. And so with some gentle but very firm reminders, we were able to shift our relationship back to where it belongs. Very lucky to come from a community that has never been afraid to ask for what we want. We're also very lucky that there is an Indigenous Studies department at Trent University. It's been an institution who has long been committed to ensuring that the truth is preserved. Indigenous communities across the country have recognized and participated here at Trent University with the first program of its kind. Their commitment as an institution to recognizing Indigenous ways of learning, providing academic space for Indigenous knowledge, and pioneering the concept of an entire department dedicated to the Indigenous information across Canada is a significant contribution to ensuring the truth of our history is not forgotten. And I can't emphasize that enough. The truth part of truth and reconciliation has to be heard before we can move forward. I can't imagine a student at Trent University who was unaware of the basics of the history of Canada and the treatment of Indigenous people. And that was long before these things started to come into the public domain. That is, education is critical to building relationships of truth and finding a path to reconciliation. So while the Indigenous Studies Department stands separate from the governance relationship between Curve Lake First Nations and Trent University, it's a program that we appreciate and participate in. And I recognize that the staff and students there have stood by us, learned about us, and continue to agree with us as we hear more and more about the early days of our education in Canada. I'm thrilled today to be able to share with you that our relationship with Trent University really has become the standard we share in our other relationships. This is the goal that we set with a variety of partners and projects to be on the same level as Trent University. We're now at a place where we feel like we have a vision, we can reach out, and there's never a doubt that if Trent University can be supportive, they will. Curve Lake had a vision of using farmland to grow fresh food in a sustainable way at the beginning of the pandemic to ensure that our members always had access to the nutrition that we needed. We began thinking about this early in 2020, and we reached out through Trent University, through our partners at Trent University, and received more support in developing this project than we could have ever imagined. Not only did we receive advice on how to begin, but ongoing support has continued. They quietly tucked our seedlings into some of their greenhouses to make sure that we got an early start on the growing season. And then throughout 2021, we were able to deliver the food that we had harvested in our first crop to our community members, providing that extra bit of fresh green vegetables to everybody that needed it. To me, it's important ultimately that we are treated with respect and equality, that we are viewed and valued as partners with not just historic rights, but as relations who have agreed to live together, to work together, and to share this space into the future. And that's what we achieve with Trent University. As soon as they have an idea, they reach out to us, they ask our thoughts, they look for ways to ensure that their projects benefit both our community as well as the student community and the academic community at their university. It's a pretty amazing place to be. It's difficult to move along that spectrum, but I'm really thrilled to be able to share with everyone how we've been able to do that. And it's as simple as picking up the phone, as reaching out by email, not waiting for issues to fester, but making sure that we're addressing them head on as early as we can. I want finally to address a theme that I've heard today, both from Elder Mitchell and from Maureen when she was speaking. We're all looking at the crisis that's facing Mother Earth and how we can move forward in a good way. I've been invited to participate in the Indigenous Advisory Council on Small Modular Nuclear Reactors in Canada and the action plan associated with that. And the one thing that all of our Indigenous Advisory Council has said is that we need to bring education to our community. Education allows us to understand the path forward, and it allows us to make decisions from an informed and understanding place. So while I'm not formally an educator, I have the utmost respect for what each of you do and the work that you achieve every day. I understand that it's integral to charting a healthy path forward, and our elder today emphasized that. So Chiniwach for the opportunity, for inviting me today, and for including me in these conversations. Chiniwach.
Everybody knows, like on this call, everybody knows education is the way forward. We're all talking, we've all been talking that language for years and years and years and years, and you get it. So that's amazing. It's remarkable. And it's remarkable that you're going to engage and take your community forward. You're going to engage your youth. You have a connection to a long-term connection to a university that is working with you. You've built that foundation over time, and you're using it as a springboard for growth, as a springboard for progress and improving outcomes for youth, for adults who go back to university, because that's a trend in our community, and for our communities themselves, because we're all engaged in negotiation right now in terms of taking control of First Nations education. That's what we're doing. And we've been working on this the leadership of Assembly of First Nation and the Chiefs of Canada for years and years, early 70s, with the white paper and what it motivated making our people become political. We're always political. We live in the political bubble. But what we have to do is ensure that our chiefs are like-minded as you are, because it's our job to take care of our communities and our people and everyone in them. And so I want to say Nyago again, because I think this is inspiring for me to see you, and your words were remarkable. That's all I can say. I just want to say thank you. Delightful to have the opportunity to share with you some of our experiences. I don't speak very often. I let other people do that for me, but I think that sometimes you have to step up and fill a space and share your ideas, because this is an exciting time that we live in. And of course, Mike Mitchell, Nyagoa, for your opening prayers. I always listen carefully because you have so many new gems that you give us, wisdom, pieces of wisdom. And I have to think about them long and hard, because they change as my experience and context changes. And see, knowledge doesn't stay the same. We evolve. And so that's the wonderful thing, because every time you speak, it's something new, because it's a different time, a different space. And I don't know if we know that, but it's true. It's part of the brain. And I want to talk a little bit about that in some of my examples, but it is important for us to share our ideas. It's important now to have a voice. We have so much to share with others. And I want to say that I was especially thrilled to hear both Maureen Johns and Heather Morasti this morning, because they are very thoughtful and they're very, very committed and dedicated to their people. They're passionate, and we all can see it and feel it and hear it in what they say and how they say it. And so it's always a pleasure to speak with my colleagues, to bring that forward, because I'm reminded that it is important to hold people up now. There hasn't been enough of that, and it's not our. I think it was always our way to do that, and I think that with every new day, we can create a new way, and we do, and we perhaps don't know it. I really do want you to know that all of the people here today, and especially Heather and especially Maureen, have made this town hall very, very intriguing. And I can't imagine having, when you're just beginning the journey to take control of First Nations education, it's daunting. It's very hard to make many of the changes that we have to make. But when you build them over time, look where you are now. I mean, it's amazing what you're doing. And your timing is impeccable. It's the right time. And now you have so much to share with others. And so many people will benefit it when we put these little scripts up online. We are the place of videos. And I know I was saying this morning to my staff, I said, well, I was looking at the ISC, Indigenous Services Canada website, and I'd been talking to them over there at the higher levels, and all of a sudden I saw I was looking for some information, and I saw a different website. It's like blew me away. They have copied what we're doing. Everything's a video now, which is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's a good way to see and share. It's a record. It's a visual. More of our people will maybe look at it, because they can see it. There's a change. Changes for the better, depicting our communities and our First Nations relationships in a different way. And it's coming from the community people, which is wonderful. So I think that I encourage you to go to look at their website because it's different and in a good way. Excuse me. All right, so next slide, please. So let me get back on track here. My opening, I want to say Sego, bonjour, greetings. I've already spoken about Mike, and I want to thank the host of the Western Regional Area, which was Maureen Johns. Thank you so much for that. We're very grateful that you stepped up and wanted to participate. Today's topic is about partnership relationships. This is one of my favorite topics along with governance. I think that everything we do is about relationships. It's about how are we gonna bring that forward? What is it gonna look like? So next slide, please. So we started with Indigenous Services Canada. They have this education partnership program, and it's about partnership relationships, and they support the establishment and the advancement of agreements with provinces and provincial school boards so that you improve student outcomes in the coordination of transition of students between First Nations and provincial schools. That can happen at various grades. And at Six Nations, it happens at grade 9. You go from elementary school into high school off the reserve. There's no high school on the reserve at Six Nations. That's true in Tyendinaga, which is Bay of Quinte Mohawk, another Mohawk community. And I'm pretty sure that's true in Akwesasne and Ganawage. But what I do know is that our communities have some of their own language schools that they've started a while ago and now are getting really amazing positive results with learners who have gone from kindergarten to and finished grade 12 in a language school. So we have those two, which I think we need to highlight and spot. You know, we're going to have a town hall on those schools because I think I want to hear more about what happened, how did it work, how did the students feel, how did they grow, how did they become, what do they feel like now? They must be connected to community in a way that when my time wasn't doable or possible because we had superintendents in our communities. And we haven't heard a lot about that experience because no one has shared it. We're just finding our voices now in terms of speaking up and sharing. The ISC also, this partnership program supports advancement activities, which include collaborative and time-limited initiatives that improve student achievement in First Nations provincial schools. And these are activities identified in a joint work plan. And they're usually project-based. These are all project-based. So we respond to education recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. There are 94 of them, and some are devoted strictly to education. There's a lead to development of new approaches to tuition and education delivery in this program. And there's an opportunity to create better linkages between elementary and secondary education on reserves, early childhood education program, or labor market programs through partnerships involving other federal and provincial departments. And this is on the website of Indigenous Services Canada, but this is what we're talking about today, these kinds of partnerships, and there's money available to pursue them. And ISC has money for these kinds of projects on an annual basis, and so it's important to put this in context. Next slide, please. However, we've been really lucky at First Nations Education Administrators Association. We have had First Nations who are in communities, who are directors of education, who are head up authorities, who are in the positions that all of you are, who have driven our board in such a positive, amazing way. And they have ensured that our connection is in every part of our organization, our connection to education administrators is in our organization. And I want to hold up Maureen Johns is board of director as a Western rep. She's doing an amazing, outstanding job for us. And Bill Shade is also one of our newest members on the board of directors for FNEAA. And we're excited to work with him. He brings lots of knowledge, and he's been very positive on our board. So it's going to be a great journey with him, an adventure. But our vision is about balancing the interconnectedness in education, rooted in First Nations languages, cultures, traditions, and self-determination under our First Nations control of First Nations education. That's what our vision is. So this is what our job is. This is what we have to do. It's very exciting. It's not easy, but we love it. We feel privileged to have this vision. And then our mission, we're a gathering place for First Nations education administrators, for you to share your information, collect and share your ideas, and enhance capacity in education, certification, professional development, creating partnerships, systems development, and services that we provide within our organization because we have the knowledge and skills to do so. Mentoring, we're going to be calling upon our members who join us to help mentor young people and other administrators across the country. And we also hold conferences. We have an annual conference, a national gathering every year. And our values, this is what I marvel at the brilliance of this. And it's about First Nations are committed to values associated in the teachings of our members' nations. What that means is every one of our over 600 First Nations communities is different. There's diversity built in to who we are. And there's inclusivity built in to who we are, because First Nations education administrators will do what they have to do to share their values. They have to go to their people to have an understanding of what those values are. And what one community has is going to be different from every other community. Every community, First Nation, has a unique perspective and that's of great value. So the diversity and inclusivity is built into our lives and built into our organization. Next slide, please. So the strategic plan for 2020-2025 that was approved by our board members, it involved these 6 major goals. And the goal 1 is certification. We want to build a certified professional body of First Nations education administrators. Professional development, we want to create quality products to build individual, organizational, and community professional capacity. Partnerships, key, it's one of our key goals, is to promote awareness, inclusion, sharing, and learning from each other. We want to share with you, we want to hear, and we want to partner. So we feel that every one of our members is a partner. And right now, well, I won't say it because I've got it on a slide, but we also have as a goal in our strategic plan, education systems development services, providing valuable resource, being a resource for reliable information and services that meet the needs of First Nations education administrators and directors of education and planned outcomes. We want to help you do your job better. We want to, the goal 5 is mentoring, building relationships to engage members and support learners. And we have a national conference, national gathering in October. We have made the decision just recently that the national gathering, we thought we could have in person at the Fairmont Hotel in Manitoba. in 2022, but it's too close. We are not certain that we'll be out of the pandemic, the global pandemic and the Omicron. So we have made the decision right now to make the October 2020 National Gathering digital, virtual, instead of in person. And then we will definitely be doing, hopefully 2023, our national gathering in person in Winnipeg, in Manitoba. So we've just made that clarification. Next slide, please. What environment, what context, where are we? What's happening? Well, there was a PM statement from United Nations, September 21, 2017, which gave full support to transforming education to First Nations control. We'll look at that in a minute. We've had this 2-year global pandemic. It's not going away quickly, and maybe it will never go away. Maybe we'll always have to have a booster, which I'm inclined to think, that we'll always have to be vaccinated. And we're going to learn to live with it because we have changed world and changed ways of doing things. So we need to start those discussions. And we're in the middle of reconciliation. It's now passed. We have legislation that allows us to implement, and we have to learn how to do that and find our voices and share our ideas. Next slide, please. So Prime Minister Trudeau, in his address in September 21, 2017, to the United Nations General Assembly, he said, our efforts to include new investments to close the gap in First Nations education and new education agreements that recognize the power and authority of First Nations communities. That's where we're going to focus our efforts. We're going to close that gap. We're going to have new education agreements, and we're going to recognize the power and authority of First Nations communities. So we need to see that. We haven't seen it yet, but we have it on record. He said these agreements recognize First Nations authority to develop and implement control education systems run in communities, by communities, for communities. We have to remember that whenever we talk to officials. This system that I'm negotiating is run by my community, for my community. And this means a new relationship between the Government of Canada and Indigenous peoples. It's got to be a relationship based on recognition of rights, based on recognition of respect, cooperation, and partnership. Keep this slide at hand when you're talking to Indigenous Services Canada officials and they're talking to you about your agreements. This is what the Prime Minister has promised. This is what their job is to do, to implement well. So we have to be mindful of that. Next slide, please.
Sorry to interrupt there. Sorry to interrupt, but just 2 minutes left.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so the global pandemic stats worldwide, January 20, we have 336.8 million cases of COVID, 5.6 million deaths. In Canada, January 20, 2.9 million cases of COVID-19 and 32,190 deaths. And in First Nations, I'd like you to know that as of January 19th, according to Indigenous Services Canada and Stats Canada, 65,000 cases of COVID on First Nations reserves and 588 deaths. And this occurrence of COVID is 77% higher in First Nations communities compared to Canada. We are in terrible shape. We have to take care of our communities and we need help doing it. And Canada has to step up. So reconciliation, where are we? Reconciliation is a healing process, public truth sharing, apology, commemoration, acknowledges and redresses past harms. We have to have constructive action on addressing ongoing legacy of colonialism that have had destructive impacts on our people, cultures, language, education. We require support of Aboriginal people's cultural revitalization and integrating Indigenous knowledge systems, oral histories, laws, protocols, connections to the land and to the reconciliation process, substantial investment of resources, and sustained public education and dialogue. It's time to give voice to First Nations, to empower them to lead the way forward for First Nations and communities, and educators are in that position. Next slide, please. So our strategic approach, we support goals, objectives, a strategic plan, long-term relationships, priority areas for partnership funding, and membership includes a wide range of corporate members who fund a lot of our activities. Next slide, please. We are members in kind who are volunteer partners providing in-kind services, conference support, and donations to the FNEA Foundation when we get it established. Next slide, please. So our partnership, we want organizational, these are steps, need for partnership. We're going to look at the value benefits of partnership, identifying and selecting partners, partnership building roles, responsibilities, outcomes, maintenance, and evaluation. Next slide, please. And different types of partnerships with corporations, suppliers, education institutions, collaborative partnerships, strategic alliances. Next slide, please. So here is the diagram where you'll see FNEA has to examine ourselves and see how well we're doing in organizational assessment. How are we doing? Are we ready for a partnership? And what kinds of partners do we want? And what are we going to build? And we are then maintain and evaluate. And the potential partner is going to do the same process at the same time. And then together, we're going to find a plan for partnership activities where we look at common goals and priorities and common project, where we define contribution and define level of partnership selection and define roles and outcomes when we build that partnership. We have checklists that do that. Next slide, please. And we will share them to you. Here's one checklist where we're building partnership with significant value and benefits. We'll post this for you. And next slide, please. We have step 4, the partners, are they acceptable? We have a bunch of criteria that you can use and help you do this in your community. Next slide, please. So the focus on the long term, we want to focus on long term. We want new members, and so renew when it's time and become a member. Our benefits, it's a place to gather and build a network, access professional training, certification and services, participate in national gatherings, special events, access to high quality resources, tools and templates, share knowledge and experiences. Next slide, please. So we're going to make connections. We're going to build partnerships. We have partnerships that we're with all our members, we think. So that's over 100. And we're beginning discussions with Greenfield Learning, MasterCard Foundation, Deloitte, and Centronic. We are going to pursue those and others. So what's it about? It's about making connections, building relationships. You got to decide who: First Nations learners, parents, teachers, education administrators. The majority of First Nation learners are in provincial and territory schools. We have to determine how many First Nations are in provincial territorial school boards. How do you work with First Nations to promote self-determination and First Nations control of First Nations education? And during this time of reconciliation, working together is mandatory, not just desirable. We want long-term relations. It's going to take time, and it's going to be an ongoing interaction. So this is just the memberships. We have, keep going please, 84 and 21, which is, and that's it. And then taking control. It's just, we're going to start from where we are at. We're going to decide what pre-contact sovereignty looks like, because nobody knows what it is. Nobody's lived then. We're going to talk about the treaties. We're going to talk about assimilation and colonialism and residential schools and dependency. And then we're going to decide for ourselves, each First Nation, about self-governance and First Nations control and implementation. And the conversations we're going to have at those local levels. And it's going to be different. but we're here to help you. We have some courses that will help you do this. So Nyawago for listening, letting me share my words. Oh yes, yeah, I didn't even finish that one. The paradigm shift. We all have to work on this together, because the vision of the future, First Nations people see themselves as self-sufficient, autonomous, and significant contributors. Federal government needs to transform and change its Indian policy and its mindset. And we have to remind them of the United Nations on Rights of Indigenous Peoples. That's all been passed. We're past that now. We're in the implementation phases. And Canadian Constitution 1982 focusing on the rights of Indigenous peoples. So we have everything. We have everything we need to do it. We just have to do it. So let's stand up together. Let's be stronger, build that foundation, and make every day a new way for First Nations as we move forward. Now